Ladies and gentlemen, the Chief Justice of India has got another friendly warning from members of his own fraternity. 2 weeks ago, some 600 lawyers, as you know, had written to him complaining of vested interest groups trying to pressurize the judiciary. In a follow-up to that, today, 21 judges, retired judges, have done the same. 17 former judges from High Courts and 4 from the Supreme Court as well have written to the Chief Justice of India alleging attempts by a section to undermine and pressurize the judiciary. Now, in their letter to the Chief Justice of India, the former jurists have raised concerns about quote-unquote calculated pressure and misinformation being spread regarding the judicial system. Calling this group of people politically motivated, the judges say they are pressurizing the judiciary and trying to get outcomes in their favor. The letter also says that this quote-unquote lobby celebrates when a verdict is in its favor, but goes all out in criticizing the judiciary if a judgment goes against them. They name no names, but the reference is clearly to lawyers like Kapil Sibal and Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who are appearing for opposition leaders like Arvind Kejriwal and K. Kavita. The wordings and the sentiment is very similar to the letter that 600 lawyers led by Harish Salve had written. This is the second such letter to reach the Chief Justice of India's doors in the last 2 weeks. In March, a group of 600 lawyers, including senior advocate Harish Salve, had penned a similar letter to the Chief Justice. They had claimed that vested interest groups are trying to influence court decisions, and this hate job takes place in a strategic manner right before elections. In fact, the Prime Minister had responded to that letter. He had referred to this letter and slammed the Congress, accusing them of bullying and browbeating the judiciary. Today, the Congress party has termed these signatories of the letter as BJP judges. They are calling these letters an orchestrated campaign by the Prime Minister to browbeat and intimidate the judiciary.
This letter is a part of an orchestrated campaign of the Prime Minister to threaten, to browbeat and intimidate a judiciary that has flexed its muscles in recent months. A judiciary that has called out India's biggest corruption scandal, the electoral bond scam. A Supreme Court which said that there is a breakdown of constitutional machinery in Manipur. That is the target. This letter of the 21 judges, Modi-friendly judges, former judges, has to be seen along with that letter of some 600 Modi-friendly lawyers. And this is all an attempt to intimidate, frighten, browbeat an independent judiciary. The greatest threat to judicial independence comes not from the Congress party, but from the BJP. It comes from Mr. Modi. It comes from Mr. Shah. And you see the comments that was made by the distinguished jurist who is the fourth signatory in that letter, in this letter. And the comments he made about the Prime Minister when he was a serving judge. Serving judge. You will know where this letter has come from.
Let me go straight across to Justice S.N. Dhingra. He's a former Delhi High Court judge. He's one of the signatories to that letter. He's also someone who is known for handing over the death sentence to Afzal Guru, the parliament's attacker, and he's also known for his probe into Robert Vadra's alleged land scams. Justice Dhingra, thank you very much. Can I start by asking you, what is the purpose of writing this letter? There is a similar letter that was written some 2 weeks ago. Why did you feel the need to write a copy-paste sort of job once again, this time signed by judges?
The purpose of writing this letter was to assure the Supreme Court that there were judges, retired judges of Supreme Court, High Court, who stand by the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court should not succumb to pressures of lobbies which are active in Supreme Court. See, these lobbies try to create a narrative that Supreme Court was under pressure, Supreme Court was not doing this, Supreme Court was not giving judgments according to law. All these lobbies try to pressurize Supreme Court by giving interviews on TVs, writing articles on in newspapers, criticizing Supreme Court judgments. Supreme Court see decisions, not judgments. They don't criticize Supreme Court judgments on merits. They simply say Supreme Court is under pressure of the government or under pressure of so and so. And that is how they want to denigrate the Supreme Court. So the purpose of the letter was to tell the Supreme Court that it should not succumb to pressure of such lobbies, such elite groups who are out to damage the reputation of Supreme Court.
Justice Dhingra, since the letter names no names and doesn't tell us what this lobby is that you're talking about, can you help our viewers understand exactly who you're talking about? We don't understand words like lobbies, etc. Please help us understand.
Recently read about, a senior advocate, I think it was Kapil Sibal, who passed remarks on a decision of Supreme Court that history will not look kind upon you. This is a clear threat of painting Supreme Court, in a dark picture of Supreme Court. That these are the advocates who are who have created a kind of lobby, who day in day out keep criticizing Supreme Court if the judgment is not in their favor. We consider the duty of the Supreme Court, these advocates, is to argue the case and allow the Supreme Court to decide the case on merits. Instead, they advance political arguments. Most of the time, you will see that even in the court, instead of advancing arguments on merits, political arguments are advanced. Democracy is in danger. The institutions are in danger. The institutions have been, under pressure. These kind of arguments are totally extrajudicial arguments. These are to create a kind of scene in which judiciary is also painted as if judiciary has been won over by government. These kind of, arguments are totally uncalled for. And the Supreme Court should not come to these kind of arguments.
No, so the fact is, if the cases that people like Abhishek Manu Singhvi and Kapil Sibal are arguing are cases that relate to political figures, obviously the arguments that will be made will be to some extent political as well. But do you as retired judges feel that the Supreme Court has already succumbed to such pressure? Because neither has Mr. Kejriwal got bail, neither has K. Kavita.
That is another problem of being vocal when they become vocal on the basis of media reports. You see, we saw Pardiwala becoming vocal and telling Nupur Sharma that she was responsible for all the bad things which were going on in the country because of her TV interview. Or there's a judge who recently in Patanjali case became vocal and said, who will rip you apart. This vocalness is not, impartiality or this. The judges have to be cool, they have to be without anger, they have to be above bias, they have not to be influenced by this kind of bias, lobbies. Being vocal is not an assurance that the Supreme Court is not being biased or is not being affected. It may be vocal because of that reason itself.
But then I'm repeating my question to you. Do you feel, as the 21 retired judges who have signed on to this letter, that the courts, whether it's the Supreme Court or lower courts, have been biased in judgments under pressure? Because that is what you seem to be saying.
I am saying that effort is made to create a bias in the mind of Supreme Court by putting arguments which are not legal arguments. which are political arguments. And the Supreme Court should not come to this kind of narratives and political arguments.
But there is no evidence to show us that the Supreme Court has succumbed to it. So I wonder why you keep referring to it and keep giving them friendly advice. Let me just quickly ask you my last question on what the Congress party is saying. The Congress party is saying there are no lobbies that are pressurizing India's judiciary, but ex-judges like you who essentially are BJP judges, Modi judges they are calling you, and you are the ones who are trying to intimidate and browbeat the judiciary. How do you respond to that, sir?
You see, they are free to say so, because our effort is to counter this kind of efforts, which are being made by them to paint the judges, retired judges, and to paint others, and even sitting judges. But you see, you should remember that it was even, when 4 Supreme Court judges came out and held a press conference, that these cases are being marked only to one special, to other benches, not to us. So that shows actually that the Supreme Court judges do come to this kind of lobby pressure. And our effort is to tell the Supreme Court that they are doing good work. They should continue to do good work without affected by this kind of thing.
Okay. We'll leave it there for the moment, Justice Dhingra. Thank you very much for telling us why exactly you wrote the letter. Desh Rathan Nigam, you're a lawyer. You've been listening to Justice Dhingra. Kapil Madan, you're a lawyer as well. Can I ask you, Kapil Madan, to begin with? Fact is, look, if 600 lawyers write to the Supreme Court of India and write to the Chief Justice of India, maybe you can dismiss them as running a propaganda on behalf of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And we know that Prime Minister Modi responded to it. So clearly what it signifies is a political backing, right? But these are 21 retired judges of high courts and Supreme Courts. It won't be that easy to dismiss them, right?
So Shreya, let me say this very unequivocally with, utmost respect to, Justice retired Mr. S.N. Dhingra. I think what the statement he made on your TV channel is on the border of contempt, wherein, with no unequivocal word, he said when the judges made a oral reference that we'll rip you apart for non-compliance of the order, he said, the judge are impartial. To me, this sounded as a plain and a clear statement which is on the border of contempt by none other than a person who himself was a judge of the Honorable High Court. But I will leave that argument aside for a minute. Let me just draw your viewers' attention to the chronology of the fact. You may recall when the electoral bond judgment happened, the sitting Supreme Court president, Bar Association president, wrote a letter to the president questioning about the correctness of the judgment, and he sought president's intervention in setting aside that judgment, knowing fully well that's not the procedure prescribed under the Constitution, knowing fully well that's not the procedure prescribed under the rules of the Supreme Court. Now, what happens thereafter is that the same set of lawyers, led by one eminent lawyer, writes the first letter alleging the same allegations which are now made in the this letter, and the same lawyer has represented SBI before the Honorable Supreme Court in the electoral bond scam. Now, the third event, you very rightly pointed out, the Honorable Prime Minister also retweeted that letter and gave a political backing to this issue. Now you have a third situation where again a similar set of narrative is being trying to created, wherein they are trying to give an impression that there are some leaders perhaps of the opposition who are trying to create some sort of a pressure. I mean, this is unfathomable kind of a situation. I mean, a person who does not hold any power, he is in the opposition, he is contesting cases, and contesting cases is your fundamental and your constitutional right, because as a lawyer it's your duty to go and contest and argue your case with with full force, with all the contention that you may have. The judges may agree with you, the judges may not agree with you. Judges are fully entitled to pass their
Okay,
judgment
Kapil.
basis the facts that they have.
Let me get
Sometimes
the other point of view in. I think you've made your case. Let Desh Ratan Nigam come in here. Desh Ratan Nigam, two things strike me as very odd here. Actually, three. A, the letter that we have seen today by 21 judges is an almost copy-paste job of the letter we saw the 600 lawyers led by Mr. Harish Salve is concerned, right? So A, it looks like the sentiments were very, very similar. Number two, reading the letter, the sense I got is, are these judges questioning the wisdom of the Supreme Court and saying that they are open to succumbing under pressure? That to me was very odd. Thirdly, Desh Ratan Nigam, how is it possible that a down and out opposition led by the Congress party has influence to pressure the judiciary and not a government which has a brute majority? Things don't add up here.
Shreya, let me tell you one thing. The only time judiciary succumbed was during emergency, when the certain set of judges were favored and a verdict in favor of in the review for Mrs. Gandhi was obtained, and a lot of bypassing was done, and number of judges who were bypassed and made Chief Justice. And you remember Hansraj Khanna resigned. Justice Hansraj Khanna, he was not made the Chief Justice.
Correct.
I think that was the only time we saw judiciary succumbing. Yes, there are, unnecessary criticism by certain sections of lawyers when the verdict does not go in their favor. Instead of, as Justice Dhingra was saying, instead of criticizing on merits, they make political statements. That is where the concern, I think, is arising about these people. So you criticize it on judgment. Point number one, Supreme Court went wrong on this. In this particular way, and this is what we said, and it has not been considered. I can appreciate that. And let me tell you, these letters and all, maybe some kind of perception battle going on, but Supreme Court probably is very strong
Correct.
today. I have seen when the judgments in Rafale did not go in their favor, a huge hue and cry was there. Pegasus, I know, when they did not get a stay in the matter of 370, the huge hue and cry was there. The matter is still pending. Even when they made a committee and for understanding farm laws and a different kind of recommendations were made. Then also again this the criticism was not on merits. So you can always criticize a judgment,
Okay. But here's the
not
problem.
criticize the judges.
But Mr. Ratan, no, here's the point. Judgments and judges are not above criticism. Neither is the Supreme Court of India.
Yes.
And if someone wants to make, the criticism political, because in many cases there are political leaders involved in cases they are finding, what is the harm in that? The Supreme Court just, by the way, very wisely has decided to keep quiet on this friendly warning / advice it has been getting for the last 2 weeks, first by the lawyers and now from retired judges. These retired judges have been called Modi judges. Is there a fair criticism? Perhaps it is, perhaps it is not. But as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, I don't think we need to judge their wisdom and their capability. That's all I'm saying. Do they even need these friendly warnings? Perhaps not. We'll leave it there for the moment. Desh Ratan Nigam, thank you very much for joining us. Kapil Madan, thank you very much for joining us.